My name is Mario Aguilar, and I've been involved with Chicano Park since 1973. I was 19 when I first came to the park. I was a student at San Diego State University, and I was going to the Centro Cultural de la Raza, and of course, if you go there, you have to come here. There was no kiosco. It was pretty basic, and they would bring in these portable trailers as stages for the performers. And I performed as ballet folklorico with the Enrique Ballet Folklorico Naslan. And so I was really into the cultura, and the two poets, Alurista and Juan Felipe Herrera, had a group called Los Servidores del Árbol de la Vida, which was a very important Chicano indigenous music/poetry group at the Centro. And they found out I played violin, so they asked me to join them. So we would perform different places. At that time, I didn't realize that the songs we were singing were alabanzas de la danza azteca, but with words changed to reflect Chicano reality north of the border. So we were invited to go to a ceremony in Mexico City. It was TENAZ, which stood for Teatros Nacionales en Aztlán, and it was the first international gathering of North American and South American Chicano/Latino teatro groups. And we met in Mexico City. Teatro Mestizo from the Centro performed, and different groups from all over. And part of the opening was a church mass at the place called El Árbol de la Noche Triste, which is where Cortés cried when they first lost the very, very first battle, and a lot of his men drowned carrying gold out of the city or were captured and sacrificed. So it was a very important place, because it was like, if they only had succeeded, we wouldn't be speaking in Spanish right now. Ni modo, it's history. But it was really interesting to see these dancers. I had never seen anything like them before. It was like, what is this? And they said, oh, it's danza azteca. And I said, what? You mean there's still danzantes aztecas? Well, 40 years later, we realized that they're not really danza aztecas, danza chichimeca, the people that were never conquered by the Aztecs. But at that time, that's what they called it, danza azteca. And so I saw it in Mexico, and when I came back to the US, I was really excited, but also sad, because I thought, I'll never learn that, because it's 2,000 miles away. And then I hear a drum in Tijuana, in Revolucion, and it's like, what is that? And it was my future maestro, Florencio Yescas. He came from Mexico City with 12 young men, stopping in town by town until they could get money to go north. And their goal was to go to LA. So a woman crossed them from Otay Guadalupe Church so they could dance in the church procession downtown. And then Juan Felipe introduced me to them. And it's like, lo and behold, danza azteca in the Centro Cultural. So it was at that point in 74 when La Danza came to San Diego to stay, because Andres Segura had been here the year before and did a new fire ceremony at the Centro Cultural. And then the next year in 75, Florencio did a new fire ceremony, because nobody really can agree to the calendar. Which year was the new fire? Was it this year or this year? And so what I learned is that the 52-year cycle basically depends on your calendar. So in Tijuana today might be March 13th, and National City may be April 10th, and right here it's April 9th, because their calendars didn't matter as to when they started. It mattered when the town was founded, or when the great king was born, or whatever, And so with that history in mind, this year, because of COVID and the protections that you guys are doing in the committee for our community, which I think is really important, because a lot of groups don't have, pardon my Spanish, but the huevos to say we're not going to get together this year. because of this thing. Everybody wants, oh yeah, let's party, let's do it. But you guys are doing what you should do, what everybody should do. And so we thought, this is the 52-year cycle. It's the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new cycle according to our indigenous ways. Because the calendar is the moon calendar and the sun calendar. And when they both start on the same day, it's only every 52 years. So we said this is 52 years, the closing of a cycle, the birth of Chicano Park, the birth of the Centro Cultural, and the birth of Chicano Studies at San Diego State, first one in the nation. So it's a very important calendar round, as we call them, very important calendar round that is ending, and we need to celebrate the new calendar round, which includes the first cycle for the museum. 52 years from now, they'll be celebrating the end of the second cycle for the park, for the Centro Cultural, for San Diego State, and the end of the first cycle for the museum. So we old-timers, like the guys that just got here, we won't be here to see that cycle, but you guys will. And so it's important for you guys to know why we're celebrating it and why it's important to do, because this is not based on Mexico. It's not based on whose interpretation of the calendar. Was it 74 or 75? It doesn't matter, because this is our Chicano calendar round. And we're just doing what was done in Mexico by all the nations. They had a calendar, and they started their temple, they started their people, and they said, let's start our calendar round. Let's start our calendar period. And so that's why there's so many different calendars in that place, because everybody, they said, okay, well, you guys say it's August 28th. Okay, we'll say it's August 28th, but in our calendar round, it's actually August 3rd. But everybody knew everybody's calendars. That's why when you go to Xochicalco in Morelos, you see all of these dates on the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. And basically, it's all the astronomers, all the priests, all the mathematicians got together and said, hey, our calendars are all going wacko. Let's put them together. And okay, your 3 reed is our 4 monkey. Okay, so now let's agree on which one is it going to be. Well, everybody else celebrates 5 house. Okay, let's both agree that we're going to use 5 house. So they had a meeting, and so they got their calendar rounds more or less organized. So we're doing the same thing, but based on our Chicano reality, the founding of the park, the founding of the Centro, the founding of Chicano Studies, and now the new calendar round here at the museum. So what I have planned, and hopefully I can get help, is we're gonna, we have a lot of carrizo, which is like bamboo reeds growing in the backyard, and we're gonna cut, as it was done, 500 years ago, we're going to cut 52 of them, because the cycle is 13 years times 4 equals 52. That's why the voladores, you were talking about that. The voladores, there's 4 of them, and they spin around 13 times. And that's 52 years for a solar cycle. So it's all related. So we're going to cut the 52 years, the bundles, and then we're going to have 4, and then we're going to have 4 people bring them into the fire. We're going to have a fire burning, and then we're going to put it out, symbolizing we're closing the old cycle, symbolizing that is part of history now. And then we're going to light a new fire, which is the new calendar round, and then we're going to use those sticks to take fire to the people that are there, and we're going to add little veladoras to give to people so that they can take the new fire home and spread it out to other people. And so that's what was done in the old days. The whole empire would turn off all their fires, and then all the people at home would take their pottery and break them to symbolize the end of the cycle. So we're going to have some clay pots, hopefully, available to break, and we're asking people if you want to bring a old coffee cup or an old olla that you don't want anymore, we'll break them right there to symbolize the end of the cycle in your home. And then the fire comes into your home And in those days, you always kept the fire going because there was no matches, there was no lighters. So if you let the fire out, oops, now you got to start all over again with the little sticks. So we want to do that so that whether it's danzantes or the community represented by you guys, because we're not inviting people from out of town, just the local dancers. I know that because it's at 4, a lot of people aren't going to come because it's like, hell no, I'm not getting up at 4 to go do that. It doesn't matter because whether it's 4 or 40 people, we want to do it as a blessing, as a prayer, and as a symbol, because all of this is symbolic. You know, dance as a symbol, everything's a symbol. That's why some people take it to a theatrical level. We've got to do this, we've got to do that, and it's like, no, you don't, because the Great Spirit knows what's in your heart, and whether it's 4 people or 40, whether you have 10 feathers or 5,000 feathers, doesn't matter because you're doing it from the heart. And so this ceremony, the dream is that we do the fire, we put the old fire out, we light the new fire, we spread the new fire, and then 5 o'clock in the morning or so, it's still dark, but you can start seeing the dawn coming up. And there is an Aztec god or Mesoamerican god called Tlahuizcalpantecutli, which means the Lord of the Wall of Light. And that's what dawn is. When you look at the light in dawn, you look around you and it's like a big wall of light is coming up, brighter and brighter and brighter, until finally the sun pops up behind the mountains. So while you look in the newspaper and it says the sun is going to rise at 6:53 in your neighborhood or your city, but meanwhile it's been rising over the Laguna Mountains, and that's why the sky is bright. And then you see the sun pop up behind the mountains. But by that time the sun's already come up over the desert and way over there in the east. So we want to be dancing as the light gets brighter and then as the sun comes up to welcome the new cycle of the sun. And then we'll dance, so maybe 9 or 10, we're done. Then we'll have breakfast and people chit-chat and talk, because that's the other important part of the ceremony. Because every ceremony has 2 sides. There's a duality. There's the sacred and then there's the profane. So the sacred is everything I just talked about, our spiritual offering. But the profane is the fun part. Hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you? Your traje looks nice. Where did you get those huaraches? Oh, yeah. And that's the sacred. It's still sacred, but it's not sacred in the sense of we're doing the 4 directions. It's more of a sacred of people being with people and people you love and respect and interact with. So the danza says, "Sabe Dios quién volverá." Who knows who will return? Because we don't know what will happen a year from now. Somebody we saw at 5 ceremonies, like in Mexico, all of a sudden you hear they died at a ceremony, a massive heart attack. And you're like, I can't believe they're gone. We're never going to see them again. And that's, we don't know. Sabe Dios quién volverá. So at least in this ceremony, whoever comes has an opportunity to reconnect with other danzantes and to reconnect with other people, and then we take off. People are tired, go home and sleep for 10 hours, You're still hungry, eat again,
Let me share a couple of thoughts, because I recently had a conversation with Josie Talamantes. So I'm Beatrice Zamora, Aguilar, and I've been dancing since 1980. First time I came to Chicano Park was in 1979. I had moved back to San Diego. I was born here as a young student, and fell in love with the park. Just could never ever completely leave the park, and then started dancing and have been involved in ceremony all these years. But what I think is really, really important about this 52-year ceremony is that Chicano Park is still a stronghold of Chicanismo, and that is in some areas becoming weaker. For instance, in the danza, I would say in the last 20 years, there's been a huge influx of more recent immigrants. and they bring with them a more Catholic perspective, a more conquered perspective of la danza. So danza is it's a mix. You know, you can talk more about the syncretism of the danza, how there's layers of it, right? So, for instance, simple one we always use is, you know, we believe that the earth is sacred, and Chicano Park is sacred land. And the earth is represented by Tonantzin, the woman spirit. But Tonantzin in Catholicism is the mother, so that's the Virgen de Guadalupe, you know. And so there's a lot of that syncretism or layering upon in terms of meaning. But the groups that have come in the more recent years, and I say recent, I mean like the last 20, 25 years, they're definitely more Catholic in nature. And so there's still some groups like ours that have been around up in San Francisco and Los Angeles and in Denver, Colorado. And
Santa Paula
and Phoenix, who have still this more pre-Columbian perspective.
And political.
And political. We're very political. And other groups, more Mexicano groups, are like, they don't understand. Why do you guys want to be so political? Why do you want to be at this march and that march? The dance is about prayer. And we're like, yeah, but we got to pray for our people. You know, we got to pray for our people, the strength of the people in these movements. So they're coming around. The longer those groups are here in the United States, they start to see the injustices, right? So I feel like this ceremony, when I was talking with Josie Talamantes about it, she started crying. And she said, oh my God, this is what we need. And I said, and Mario was the one who said, I think this is the first that we've ever done in Aslan, because this is our first 52 years that we're completing. And this is historical and magical and something that we have to record and save for the archives, because it's a first. And it's really important to maintain that Chicanismo, that Chicano spirit that is what the park is all about and what our lives have always been about. Right?
Yeah, I think I tell people, especially the groups she's talking about, the Mexicano Catholic section of danza, because we all dance together. They accept our craziness and we accept their Catholicism. But I tell them, if it hadn't been for Chicanos being organized politically, danza would have never grown here. Because people like me, I was 19 way back in 73, 74, 20, we were looking for something about our indigenous past. And a lot of Chicanos my age went to the Sundance, they went to the Hopis, the Shumish, they went everywhere. And the elders would say, well, you know, we're really happy that you guys are interested in our stuff, but you guys have stuff in Mexico too. Why don't you go to Mexico? A lot of Chicanos were afraid because when we go to Mexico, they say, oh, pinche pocho, you don't even speak Spanish, you know, so a lot of them were afraid. A lot of them are not, you know, like me at that point, I was not into Catholicism, so it was like, I don't want to go with those pinche gachupines, prisi, this que el otro. And it was, if it hadn't been that we were mechistas, that we were with the farm workers, trying to support them, danza would have not exploded like it did in the 70s amongst Chicanos. And so people have lost that, they've forgotten that. And I tell them, you need to remember that, you know, I always tell them, when you got here, the table was already served. We would go into a church and they'd go, oh, Dios mío, look at those encuerados, oh my God, those savages in the house of God, you know.
He got kicked out of a church in National City, you know.
Yeah, because I was an Aztec.
But now that church wants danzantes there, right? So that hard work has been done by those early Chicanos,
yep,
including us, but others, you know, that laid that foundation, and even our own people would laugh at us, right? And now they don't. Now everybody wants danza at their ceremonies, at their weddings, at their quinceañeras, at their funerals, and that's beautiful, you know. But it took a lot of work to get there. And it took a lot of work for the local native tribes to start to embrace us. You know, we remember in the early years when we would dance like at a powwow or something. We're not big on
Balboa
dancing at
Park.
powwows. And they'd say, well, here come these guys. They say that, you know, they're native, you know, they're they say that, so here they are.
They're from Mexico.
And then like 10 years later, we go to the same event and say, here come our cousins from south of the border. So that shift happened.
Slowly.
And it's still happening. And we all have to work at, building those relationships.
I always, because the way my brain works, I always look at everything historically. That's the way it is in my brain. And 2,000 years ago in Teotihuacan, the place of all the big pyramids outside Mexico City where all the tourists climb to the top and buy the little chingaderitas for, mementos. Excuse me, Teotihuacan means the place where nobody really knows what it means. It could mean the place where men become gods, or it could be the place where the gods were born, or the place of the people with the sacred road. That's the one I believe because of the Calle de los Muertos. But anyway, that was where all the royalty, even from the Mayans 600 miles away, would come up to be crowned, to be legitimized as kings or leaders of their nations, and then they would go back. And Teotihuacan even conquered a couple of Mayan cities, Tikal being the biggest, where they had so much power, and everybody wanted to be like them. As a matter of fact, they were called Toltecas. The original Toltecas were people, Tuli means reed, like reeds of grass in the water, and Tolteca means the people of the reeds. In other words, a place where there's so many people, it looks like there's reeds everywhere. Because Teotihuacan had 100,000 people when it was big, at its height, bigger than Rome at the time. So Teotihuacan was the first Tula, and the Teotihuacanos were the first Toltecs. When Teotihuacan collapsed in 500, 600 AD, then the next Tula was the Tula we all know, Tula Hidalgo, with the guys with the butterflies. Yeah, these butterflies right there. That's Tula Xicocotitlan. This is another great city, but it's afterwards. But this is where people would go now to become recognized. And then when that one collapsed, over here in Puebla, in Cholula, that was the city of Quetzalcoatl. That's where they would go to be crowned kings and emperors and blah, blah, blah. And then when that collapsed, Tenochtitlan became Tula, the great city of the reeds, and where people, of course, it was the Aztec capital, so it was the great Toltec capital because they married into the Toltec families to get legitimacy. Just like some Mexicanos come here to the U.S. and they marry gringos because they want to have a last name like Morrison or Schwartz or Jones. And now I'm half gringo, my kids are half gringo. The same thing with the Mexicas. They married Toltec princesses, and then they said, oh, well, my son is a Toltec because his mother's a Toltec. And everything was matrilineal. So your dad doesn't matter, it's your mother that mattered. Who's your mother? Where does she come from? And it's still like that in many indigenous tribes. So I always tell people now, in 1970, we created our first Tolan, our first Tula for Chicanos, which is Chicano Park. So people who are danzantes come to Chicano Park every year, and one of them said it perfectly. She said, if you've never danced at Chicano Park, you have not danced in Aztlán. And I thought, you know what? She's right. She's right, because a lot of people are dancers in Chicago and New York and Las Vegas, but they never go out to dance at ceremonies. They only dance, for a party, for a school, for Cinco de Mayo, blah, blah, blah. They don't dance for rituals, for ceremonies. The biggest one is right outside. And so, we, before we left the steering committee in 2000, because of all the politics that were being thrown against us, we had like 200, 250 dancers coming every year. And then we had the problem, and we said, you know what, if you guys are accusing us of this and this and this and this, and we're the problem, okay, we'll leave. We don't want to affect Chicano Park. And so we didn't have our ceremony. The next year we made our ceremony in July, so it wouldn't affect April, because everybody was saying, oh yeah, everybody's going to come to your ceremony and not to Chicano Park. And no, our ceremony is in July, and people can come in April And they still have, and they still do, and they still will. And they come to our ceremony. And now our ceremony is up to 250 again, because it's not necessarily about what day it is, it's at the park. And so, it was tough for us to leave, but we felt like, the people that are attacking us, they're not from this area, they don't do anything. And here we are, 21 years later, where are all those people? They're gone. None of them remain.
The thing that is really unique about Chicano Park being a location for ceremony is that, we go to a lot of ceremonies with groups throughout California,
Mexico.
Arizona, Mexico. Well, Mexico's a little different, but Arizona, Colorado, I'm talking about north of the border. Now Colorado has a park, right? They have their park where they have their ceremony. But they only do that like once a year there. Here at this park, all year long there's ceremony going on. If we go to LA with a different group, every year they're struggling to find a location to have a ceremony. So they might have a ceremony at a school in the parking lot, or at a park, but every year it's a different park. And it's always moving around because they don't have a Chicano park, right? But here we have a place where our group has ceremony, the other groups have ceremony. People who aren't danzantes come here and have ceremony. And that makes this place very, very spiritually powerful. It's a strong place. And I think we're so fortunate to have it, and fortunate to be involved as caretakers, because it's an important spot. It's an important space.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when they put up the kiosco, there was some people that didn't like the kioscos. They wanted a Spanish-looking kiosco. And I was on the steering committee in those days, way back in the early mid-'70s, and it was like, oh, hell no, we don't want a Spanish shit. We want it to look indigenous because we're indigenous people, And so when this one came up, it was like, perfect, this is it. And so I think that throughout the U.S., not just San Diego, not just San Diego County, but throughout the U.S., Chicanos acknowledge that this place is sacred and that is special. You just stand out there and see people coming by taking pictures, and you can go up to any one of them and say, where are you from? Oh, I'm from LA. Where are you from? I'm from San Francisco. Where are you from? I'm from Phoenix. Why did they come as pilgrims? Because that's what they are. They're pilgrims. Why did they come as pilgrims to the spot? Because of the 52 years of history, from the riots in '75 and the killings that happened when the gangs were really bad, and when Jorge Gonzalez spoke, and all of that history that Tommy documented, and which would fill up 5 of these rooms. That stays with people. I taught a class last semester at San Diego State, Chicano music, Mexican and Chicano music, and part of what they have to do is do a report on music and then a web page with that report. And one of the young guys asked me, "Can I do one on Chicano Park samba?" I go, "Oh, dude, let me tell you about Chicano Park samba. I played on it." "Really?" "Yeah, my dad loves it. He loves the Alacranes." So I gave him a copy of the little tape, I put on the CD, and he goes, "That you really singing?" I go, "Yeah, I listen to the voice. It sounds weird. It's me, right?" So he was really proud, and the very first picture he puts on his webpage is him and his dad standing under all the way to the bay. And his dad's not an activist. His dad's not a political person. He's just a vato loco that grew up and survived, and now his son is the first one to go to college. But yet the park united them in a reality that they both share. So for the father, it's all those memories of Chicano Park when he was a young, crazy guy. But for the son, it's, my dad grew up in Chicano Park, and also, I'm doing my college knowledge on Chicano Park. So it's pretty powerful. Hey, Josie.
We're good with that.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you all too for sharing this because it's important. Because, like you said, that there's been such a large foundation that's set for us already. A lot of people, especially like my generation and the generation after me, they don't acknowledge it. They're just born into it and they think this is how things are always work.
Right.
You know, and I just think it's critical to share this. And I just want to thank you both.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting us to talk.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yeah.
Because the protection has to continue, or it'll go away. We know that.
And
There's a lot of enemies out there.
the hard part for you and your generation is getting 10 from over there and 20 from over here, your age, to come in and support. Because a lot of people is like, oh shit, I'm meeting, are you crazy? I'm watching the Academy Awards or something, something stupid.
Yeah.
And you need people from all walks of life. So I'm really glad that my son's gotten involved.
Oh, yeah.
Because he brings a different perspective, right? And you guys are the same generation.